Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's council meeting. This meeting is called to order, and I kindly ask our Assistant City Clerk to please take the roll.
Bruno?
Here.
Burkhart? Here. Clemens?
Here.
Ruby? Here. Kilberg?
Here.
Maladra?
Here.
Marks?
Here.
McGowan? Here. Radecki?
Here.
Swanson?
Here. We begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would like to invite our Business Development Analyst, Ms. Becker, to please lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Folks, before we kick off all the business we have this evening, including meeting our Business Development Analyst formally, I do have a brief video I'd like to share with you on the off chance you have not seen it. It is a celebration of a company here in town that just recently received an extraordinary award. They have, for the years they've been in Geneva, consistently received one of the best places to work in, if not Illinois, certainly in the country. And this year they received an award that is, I believe, worthy of our noting this evening. So Pete, if you could roll that video.
Have made the Fortune magazine Great Places to Work for Best Places for Manufacturing.
That's right. Fortune magazine and Great Place to Work named FONA the #3 workplace in the nation for manufacturing and production. That's #3 in the nation. The list is not divided by size, so this puts FONA alongside multi-billion-dollar companies. We just had to share the news with you, and we wanted to say thank you. Recognition like this would never be possible without your incredible partnership. From all of us at FONA, thank you.
Isn't that pretty cool?
Big news.
And obviously, you noticed the Geneva High School Marching Band helping them to celebrate. So I have a letter drafted to obviously congratulate them, but I thought it'd be nice to as well show that our citizens and our community that we recognize their achievement and we applaud their achievement as well. So very, very cool. We will commence with the business at hand. Item 3A is Economic Development Department presentation. Welcome, Kathleen.
Okay, this year for our annual department presentation, we decided to talk about economic incentive agreements or sales tax sharing agreements. We've recommended a few of late, and we thought this would be a good topic just to overview and also do some analysis about. We've going to start with the overview of the state regulations, and then we're going to take a look at what kind of rebates are in the region, and we're going to look at Geneva's history with these types of incentives. The sales tax rebates, which we will call them, are enabled under Illinois state law for home rule and non-home rule communities. You're allowed to share whatever percentage of sales tax you decide is appropriate for a finite period of time. The objective is to make high-impact projects financially feasible, and funds can be used for any purpose, including capital cost, infrastructure, site prep, building rehab, tenant improvements, and several other things that people have used them for. Funds can be combined with other economic development tools, business districts, TIFs, SSAs. Those have been done in Geneva. And they're attractive to municipalities because they provide immediate income to the general fund, where other funds or other tools, you have to put the money into a special fund. This allows the percentage of sales tax that you're not sharing to go right into the general fund. It's also a relatively low risk for a municipality because if the business does not produce the sales tax, the city is not required to share it. So there are eligibility findings that must be met in order to enter into one of these agreements with a business or a developer. There's criteria for vacant land and also sites with buildings. And generally for vacant land, it's the property has to be vacant for 1 year. If there was a building there in the past year before it was demolished, it has to comply with the sites with buildings. So buildings on site have to no longer comply with current building codes and or be underutilized for at least a year. There's also eligibility findings that must be met, and each one of these has to be present in a case for the project to move forward with this type of agreement. So jobs have to be created or retained, and then you have to show that the agreement, without the agreement, the project would not be possible, so that's a but-for test that you would apply. The investor or the person that you're making the agreement with has to meet high standards of creditworthiness, has to have certain credit rating, and also has to have minimum assets and evidence of equity financing. The project has to be determined to strengthen the commercial sector, further development of the area, and enhance the overall tax base. The city or the municipality also has to find that the agreement is in the best interest of the municipality. There are limitations that the state has put on more recently as part of an amendment to the statute. One is point of sale limitations, and this is to address issues where a business could be in duplicate communities, and there's been instances of bringing billing to one area, and you've probably read about this in the paper, where a municipality that had the billing perhaps had the type of agreement in place, and the other municipality took issue with that. And so now there's more reporting on submitting reports when you have point of sale matters. There's also restrictions about entering into these agreements if absent the agreement, the sales tax would have been paid to another local government, and if the tenant still has a retail location in that municipality, that finding would be present and you would not be able to move forward. Reporting has also become more transparent and more responsible. Municipalities have to report on all active agreements. There's information that needs to be entered into the state's database. And it's also nice for transparencies because local governments, you can take a look at who's doing what and understand what competition is occurring and what your developer may be receiving somewhere else. So it has really lent itself to some additional information. And with that information, there has been more studying of how these are used by our department itself and also by CMAP. So how are sales tax rebates being used? Right now in Illinois, looking at the database just this week again, there were 604 active agreements throughout the state. This is an increase in use over the last 5 years. There were about 343 in 2013. In 2016, CMAP did a review of all the agreements in place, and they found that agreements are very prevalent in northeastern Illinois. And this is most likely because there's a lot of competition up in our region, and also land prices are higher in this area, making deals more difficult to achieve. So the type of agreements that are in place in this region are shown on the map. The blue is for auto sharing for auto dealerships, and then the green is retail, and then the red is other, and others include common things like shopping centers, restaurants, gas stations. So we also took a look at how our comparable communities are doing with sales tax rebates. So our comparable communities is a group of 25 communities, including Geneva, that we have determined to be comparable for a number of reasons. And we often, when we talk about what other people are doing. We will go to this list so that our presentations are comparable and we're looking at the same group of people. So in our 25 comparable communities, we found today, or actually last week, that there were 85 existing agreements in place. And how they divided up is shown on the wheel there. 39 auto dealerships, 15 retail developers, 15 national regional retailers, 8 corporate, 3 hotels, 3 municipalities, and this is when a municipality and/or a county is sharing with each other for whatever reason. They determine that a business, the municipality will share that with their neighboring community. 1 we found for a local business, which is less common, and then 1 for a gas station. Of all of these agreements that we took a look at, what they were doing, we found that the most common type was the 50-50 sharing agreement, but we also found some sliding scales, which is where at the beginning of the agreement, you're getting more money earlier, and then as the project comes toward the end of the term, you're getting less money. Our Dotson Place agreement that we have in place right now is structured that way. And then there were some agreements which were exact dollar annual agreements, and this is more for more predictable sales. We saw this more with the car sales where they have these predictable amounts that they do. So what about Geneva itself? Let's hone down into Geneva itself. Geneva has a history of using these sales tax agreements. We found records going back to 1997. And we created a list here for you so you could see the different businesses. We had 22 since that time, 14 with national regional retailers, 7 with retail developers, and 1 with the office corporate. All of these agreements except 3 went to full end of the agreement. 2 were terminated early due to national bankruptcy, and 1 was terminated early because the property transferred. Now, this particular agreement had those regulations written into it. Most of ours do not. Some of them are transferable if ownership changes, but this particular one did not, so it ended at that time. Today, Geneva has 3 active permits and 1 pending. So Dotson Place is active, ending in 2020. Fabian Crossing just got started now with the opening of Burlington. It would be triggered with the occupancy. We have 1 for Nosh and My Salon, which is active, and then Dunkin' Donuts, which is pending. It was passed, but the development still has to complete entitlements. So we were very interested in trying to measure the success of the Geneva agreements because incentives really are just investments made on behalf of stakeholders. So it's good public policy to try to manage our incentives with the goal of maximizing returns on investment and minimizing risks. So that said, we first acknowledge that many benefits of bringing new retailers and new retail development are unquantifiable because they're difficult to measure. You know, there's jobs that are created, there's tourism benefits, there's city pride in having a certain type of store in your community, there's convenience, how people are so hungry for grocers for convenience sake. There's co-location and spin-off, which is very difficult to measure. You go to buy a bridal dress and then you go out to eat and all of those extras that happen. And the other thing that we're not measuring is the impact to the other taxing bodies because we really can only see and measure what we know here. But we do know that there's help to other taxing districts when a vacant property is no longer vacant and the EAV is not expected to decrease. So there's other benefits that we're not measuring. So doing a pure money in, money out from a municipal standpoint was something that the International Economic Development Council developed a formula to try to help municipalities and other stakeholders look at the return on investment for incentives. So we followed a formula that was created. It's pretty basic. You're looking at sales tax received minus what's rebated. You're looking at the city portion of property tax that you're receiving. We're applying a discount rate so that we are making sure that we're not looking at dollars differently. We're looking at dollars at the time of the value of them. And we've run through most of our agreements that we could find information for. So of those, we looked at our 16 agreements. And like I said, it's important to realize that this formula only measures the municipal portion of sales and property tax, not even looking at the sales tax that goes to other entities also. And the analysis is only for the period of time that the agreement is in place. So there's, if we went back to the list, you'll see that many of the businesses are still in place long after the agreement expired. So we're not looking at that at all. And what we did find by going through this exercise is that we had a range of returns from $1.18 for every dollar to 16.72 for every dollar rebated. And that came out to an average of about $3.92 for every dollar rebated. So in conclusion, we believe that a strategic approach to sales tax rebate has helped to grow the city's retail tax base and secure the property tax base. We can see if we go back to the list that there were a lot of deals that were done on Randall Road in the late 90s, which really helped Randall Road to have that push it needed. There were East Side assistance with Aldi and CVS, and then we had a few downtown properties. The Merrill shops were helped to transfer into smaller retail spaces. So you can see how this has kind of touched every area and helped the city grow. The return on the measurability of public investment has been consistently positive with minimum risks.
Thank you, Kathleen. Questions or comments for our Economic Development Director from the dais? Alderman McGowan, then Alderman Clements.
Thank you, Kathleen, for this report. It's really informative. I was actually under the impression that there were more agreements still current. I think what I had heard, when I heard the number, it wasn't somewhere in the 20s, that really reflected the number of agreements in place since the 90s.
Yes.
So really there are only 3 active agreements right now, the ones that you mentioned.
Right, we have 3 active and 1 that has been approved by the council, but it is not, it's pending, I think we would call it, because the development still has to be approved and constructed.
Right. Well, this is very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Clements.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much. I'm just curious what, if any, are the downsides to these incentives? I mean, there may not be any in your opinion, but are there any that you would consider downsides to using them?
I think the only downside would be that, the more commonly that they're used, the more expectations people have. But I think that just gives you the need to vet them more and make sure that they truly need it. We do get a lot of requests for assistance that, after we take the first steps in vetting, it really is not shown that it's there. So I think that we have the mechanics to analyze them, so I don't know necessarily if it's a downside. I think the downside is that there's an expectation that something's going to be provided.
I was wondering about that, just when you had shown that section of the state, the northeast section, and you said, well, there's a prevalence here. And I was just wondering to myself, was there a time when some municipality just kind of started using those to attract, business, and it then creates this competitive atmosphere where all of a sudden, almost by default, you have to offer those in order to attract business? Is that pretty much accurate?
Well, I think that, if you want to be competitive and you want to make sure that if you need a tool, that you have a tool. And we have a very proactive department. Economic development is a very proactive activity in Geneva, given that you've dedicated a department to the activity. So as part of our proactive efforts, we learn about properties, we talk to owners, we talk to brokers, we talk to end users. So we understand what the issues are with properties. So a lot of times when assistance is needed, we understand why in advance. So that's part of being a proactive approach. So a lot of times when people will ask us things, we will either already know that they have a hurdle, the property has a hurdle, or will not agree that the property has a hurdle. So I think that helps, that type of approach.
Alderman Radecki, then Alderman Swanson.
Thanks, Kathleen. Excellent presentation. I guess a comment and a question. I guess the comment, which might be a question too, is, and you just touched on it, when people do come forward to us asking for these things, they go through a tremendous vetting process. Like, for example, the one that is pending now didn't just simply come in and ask. I mean, there was a lot of work put in by staff and the applicant before you make a decision on it. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
to make the recommendation.
Absolutely, and a lot of that is done because when a property comes on the market or a property is slow, we're digging in there and trying to understand what's the hurdle, what's the barrier, because we're trying to break those down systematically and trying to make those matches. So, as I said, a lot of them, we already know the issues, whether it's a large code improvement that's needed to push forward another occupancy, or upgrades that are needed, or just challenges in the market itself. So we're already trying to understand those. So we're a little bit ahead of it. And then, we do have expectations of disclosures about projects. We try to close gaps without going to some type of incentive. We try to work both parties to talk with owners about the prices that they're asking, see if they can come down, push an investor to go up, and we try to get that gap to the very smallest place before we come and say, we'd like to try to close it with something.
Right. And second question is, do you have any idea of how many people that come to us asking for these agreements that we deny, either a percentage or a number, or conversely, how many are successful, just to get an idea?
I don't. I think it's more of a process. It's not like they're cold calling us and asking us and then we're saying no. It's more of a process where we are trying to figure out a way to make it happen. So sometimes it's working with an owner instead and trying to get that owner to please come down a little bit and meet this tenant, or pushing the tenant to come up. So we try not to let anyone walk away. So we will try to work with them maybe to find a different property. So I don't think that there's a large number of people that are just kind of left without something. If it's not the right project and we don't feel that we can represent or recommend an incentive, we try to find a different avenue.
Alderman Swanson.
Thank you, Kathleen. I have two questions. The first is an observation. On the chart right up here of our 22 sales tax agreements, is it any concern that many of those stores are no longer in existence? Or is that a sign of the times?
I think it's a sign of the times, because only 2 were terminated due to national bankruptcy, or the one that was, and then the third was terminated because of the sale. I did look at what was the average amount of time that a store stayed in business after the agreement expired, and it was 8 years. So I think that some of that's natural. That's not Geneva related. That's just some of these companies are no longer in existence. But on average, we did receive, after the termination of the agreement, on average 8 good years of the tax. And then you also had that improvement in place, like Sports Authority, let's take that for instance. That went through a bankruptcy, and then when the new tenant came in, there were enough improvements to the building that they didn't need anything. That tenancy was able to just go in. So even though the business may go away, the investment may linger to help the next tenant.
Okay. And in the analysis of whether or not these agreements make financial sense, I didn't see any piece that tries to estimate how much, if any, sales are lost by other Geneva businesses. It seems like we're assuming everything is incremental, whereas I think a good chunk of what these new places are going to be generating will be taking away business from other entities. Do we try to come up with that in our analysis?
I don't think that we do work it from that perspective, because our perspective is that, we want to be a draw and a regional draw, so we're not looking, it's not like a zero-sum game. People are still going to look for those items. When you have a store that closes, it doesn't necessarily mean that other stores will start to have more taxes. So if it doesn't work that way, in the reverse, I don't know how to say that it's definitely going to work that way at the onset.
But we are assuming all business is incremental. All sales is an addition in the analysis that we're preparing to see if financially it made sense.
Because we're only rebating that, so you want us to try to look at what is lost in other stores?
I guess I'm asking, do we do any analysis? Do we try to do any analysis of what could be happening? When CVS opened, did it impact Riley Drug?
Well, the one thing that we do monitor, and we can show you this in a different time, I didn't bring this here, was we do monitor sales tax by industry. So even with our restaurants, we've had several new restaurants open, and we continue to see that tax in that category increase. So we do not notice big drops when stores open. We see big drops when stores close.
Okay, so in the aggregate, yes, I understand what you're saying. I think there is a piece that we're missing, so we may be overestimating the economic benefit that we're getting. But I wanted to plant the seed that there could be another piece that we're ignoring when we try to analyze this. So, thank you.
Alderman Kilberg, and then Alderman Burghardt.
My question relates to the percentage of sharing. And we use 50% as sort of a target. Of those 22, how many of those were over 50%?
I'd have to get my sheet out. I don't have that
Okay.
information.
Okay.
I have it, but I just don't have it in my mind.
Were there some that were over 50%?
There were some over 50%.
Were there some near 100%?
There's one at 90%.
Okay. Is there any correlation between a higher incentive and a lower return on investment for the city? In other words, the higher the incentive, obviously that would correlate to a lower return on investment for the city, I would assume. Is that a safe assumption?
I could look at our data
Yeah.
to answer that question. I can't answer that right now, but
Okay.
I have the information. I could go back and look at that.
Is the council privy to reviewing your data?
Well, the issue is that sales tax is confidential under our Illinois Department of Revenue reciprocal agreement, so we cannot provide the information about the individual store's retail
Okay,
sales.
so if you blacked out the names of the businesses, then you could share it?
Possibly. I'm not sure. We'd want to talk to legal counsel because I think you could figure it
I
out.
think you can do it more by industry and in aggregates, but you can't break it down much more than that, because you will be able to ascertain what business it is, and that would be a violation of our agreement with the state.
So, okay. So how do you make a determination?
Kathleen has that information, and she's the professional who's hired to help
No,
make those
I mean,
recommendations
no, I'm
to
just
you.
saying, though, how do we make a determination then as it relates to proposals that are brought before us? If we want to benchmark, as Alderman Swanson indicated, there are some trends here where there are certain types of businesses that probably are better to try to target and try to support with a sales tax agreement than others, certain industries. Okay, well, whatever you can share, I would appreciate having a chance to review it, if there's anything that you can share. My other question was, I'll hold off on that for right now.
Alderman Burkhart.
Thank you for the presentation. Lots of good information. Obviously, our list on the right is, heavily weighted toward national retail and along Randall Road, which makes sense for the way Geneva developed in the 90s and early 2000s. 2 out of 3 of our current ones are, though, downtown, and obviously we do have several empty storefronts in downtown and some challenging buildings. Do you think we're going to need to use more of these sales tax agreements on the downtown or city center going forward? And do you think they work as well downtown as they have on Randall Road?
I believe that we will need to use all the tools that we can have access to help all of our areas, especially the downtown, which has some challenges right now. The tool is probably stronger with a higher level of tax that's collected, which is why the nationals are at a higher collection, so the rebate is collected. Like if you recall the Nash My Salon, it is helpful to them, and it helped to close the gap that they had a very high investment into some of the public infrastructure in order to make that building habitable for the use. But most likely those businesses aren't going to be creating a real high level to receive the rebate. So it's just one of the tools that we can provide, and it may need to be coupled with something else, or probably high level of owner investment along with that type of use. So yes, I think that we definitely have some areas where it could be helpful.
So there's a difference when you're selling a $30,000 car or selling a $5,000 sofa compared to a $15 omelet or something. You're
Right.
saying that's right. Okay. All
Right,
right.
unless you went to a higher split than 50, which is what I think was the reasoning behind the Dodson place, most likely.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Ruby.
Thank you. What is the duration on these agreements? Does it vary?
It does vary. There were some that were 7, some that were 10, some that were 15.
Okay. And you mentioned, I'm only familiar with the 50-50 split. The sliding scale, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, you could, if a project needs more front-end money earlier, there's the way to do it would be, you could create any ratio that you needed.
Okay.
So for Dotson, they received 90% of tax for a number of years, and then after that year expired, then it went to 30%.
Okay, it
So
balances
it's
out.
really fluid, and it's based on, I wasn't the creator of the Dotson, it was in place when I started. I'm assuming that it was based on the need and the gap that they were trying to close for that store,
Okay,
for that developer, rather.
okay. I doubt you have a simple answer for this, but what sort of factors do you look at in determining the recommendation for the amount? If it's a 50-50 and also the duration of the entire agreement?
So we look at the project performa, and we understand the gap. We look at the estimated projections for what the sales will be, and then we try to craft, we always go as low as we think we can go
Sure.
to try to make the fit.
Okay. And on your second to last slide, at the bottom, you had the number, the return.
Yes.
Can you go over that again? I didn't quite follow the,
So we looked at 16 agreements that were completed that we had the data for, and we saw in them that there was a range of returns per dollar. So for every dollar rebated, the range was the lowest one received $1.18 back, and the one on the highest end was $16.72.
Okay.
And then we just averaged that.
okay, so for every dollar that went into that business?
Yes, for every
Okay.
dollar that was rebated, the return was 118 to 16.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Marks and then Alderman Kilberg, unless anyone else who has not yet spoken wishes to do so.
One question, Kathy, the last few we looked at always had caps on them. Is that normal? Because that's just what we're going to help to make the project move on? Or does it have to have a cap, or?
Not all of them have caps.
Okay.
Dotson Place does not have a cap. It has a time expiration. Third and James, which is for the Mary Lee shop, it had a longer duration, but the cap was met earlier. So it just depends on the structure of what you're trying to achieve. If you believe that more time is needed because more of a rebate is needed, then you can extend the duration.
But in the agreement, there has to be a deadline of when it ends, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It has to have some time of finite ending.
There's no set rule on what the finite is, it just has to be in the agreement?
That's my understanding,
Okay.
yes.
All right. And so we do cap them though now, pretty much. Is that the going trend, to give that cap to make the deal?
Yes, I think it's required to have some type of end, some type of finite regulation in the agreement.
Great, thank you.
Geneva Commons was an example of a cap, as you'll recall probably, so. Alderman Kilberg for a second time, unless someone who has not yet spoken wishes to do so.
As we look at,
Alderman Kilberg.
as we look at potential agreements, what types of businesses are we targeting at the present time? What do you feel might be lacking in Geneva that we would like to bring to Geneva that we currently don't have in our offering? And where do you feel as though we might be at a saturation point and we'd be less inclined to support an agreement with a business that might be looking to come to Geneva, but we feel as though we have sufficient businesses to serve that market niche?
We always start with properties. We're a land-based, property-motivated department. So we're looking at what is vacant and trying to overcome the obstacles to that vacancy. We're looking at businesses that we think would be a good mix for the area. So, it's different for Randall, it's different for downtown. We're looking at, trends now. We're trying to attract more experiential users, more experiential retailers, more experience for people to be able to do things, not just shop, as the trends are in retailing. We study leakage and surplus reports. So there's ESRI data that shows us what's missing. Like, people may say that Geneva has enough restaurants and that restaurants are saturated, but it's not true. There's actually leakage within the food industry within the city. There are certain types of food that is not available here. There's certain types of restaurants that we still don't have. So it's interesting. We get asked that question a lot, and it's more from people who are, worried that we might attract somebody that will compete with them. So we don't try to look at it that way. We try to look at what is going to enhance the destination of Geneva, what is going to bring more people to the community, what is going to enhance community spirit and pride of having these businesses within the community. We have some, we have somebody who we're working with that's trying to open a coffee music store. We don't say we already have coffee. We don't do that. We allow them to bring forward the business objective. What we say is, where are you looking to locate, and have you looked at these spaces? This is what's available, and you have potential for those spaces. We try to understand what it is that they want as far as lease or own, what their parameters are, what level of investment they can do, and then we try to match them up with an owner or a property that we feel is going to be able to make that match. We wouldn't say no because you're too close to this, or we try to look at the city as a whole, and not take those types of approach, because it would be really a challenge, because mostly we have a lot of things here, and one business would think that another could possibly compete. But it's the mall mentality, it's the bringing people to an area that, yes, there may be people that compete, but they also thrive together. Retailers, restaurants, they thrive together. So it's just, I guess, the way that you look at it.
As you look at Geneva, as far as, like, for instance, a car dealership, we don't have any real car dealerships in Geneva. Is the limiting factor there the land availability? Is that the big limiting factor, or what do you think might be the limiting factor as it relates to that specific, that type of business?
It would be land availability. They need to be on certain corridors. There are criteria for locating, and they also like to locate in clusters.
Yeah.
So, they're also clustery with respect to that. So we would have a challenge trying to assemble the type of land that they would need to bring that use forward at this juncture of Geneva's life cycle.
Kathleen, if I could add to that, and I was just conferring with the city attorney as well, and Chuck remembers fondly, and some of you may be aware, but our forefathers determined almost by policy that Geneva would not have car dealerships in this community, period. Much like you don't see certain buildings on Randall Road. Gas stations. There's not one gas station in a 3-mile stretch of Randall Road. That was by design whenever, but nevertheless, that's, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who has not yet inquired, asked a question, made a comment, clarification? Thanks, Kathleen, very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, forgive me, Alderman McGowan for the round 2. Sorry about that.
And just a comment, I guess. I remember years ago hearing something about a tattoo and piercing parlor coming to downtown Geneva. Is that correct? Was there a discussion along those lines?
Randall Road.
Was that in Randall? And I don't think it opened.
Correct.
I think there was concern that it didn't fit in with surrounding businesses, but I think it's kind of funny because there is now a tattoo and piercing business in St. Charles, right across the border, that everyone from Geneva goes to. And I'm talking about little kids, teenagers, and it's a booming business. So that's something that we could use. I think it's missing as well.
There was a lot more to that discussion than what meets the eye.
I thought you were going to show your tattoo for God's sake.
Yeah. I understand the sentiment, but for the record, there were many, many other things that were considered along with that decision. I think it was a special use that they were asking for. They were asking for some things. There was some joint tenancy issues. There were a lot of other things that were, that went along with that decision other than just don't want a tattoo or piercing
Oh,
parlor.
yeah, no, I understand. I just think it's interesting that, I know for sure it's one business that we really don't have, and it's doing really, really well financially. And meeting a, I guess if you call it a community need, it's not really a need, but a community desire, so to speak. So it's just kind of interesting, yeah.
Thank you again, Kathleen.
Thank you.
And now we have the pleasure, because Kathleen's not going to leave the podium, to introduce all of us to your colleague, Jennifer Becker. Jennifer, come on up. I've got a cheat sheet on you as well.
You do.
Most importantly, this is, I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but you did vote unanimously, perhaps when you were sleeping, but all new hires are Augustana graduates. Jennifer,
We know the secret handshake.
we know the secret
Right.
handshake, indeed, yeah, so. Business Development Analyst. You've lived in Northern Kane County your entire life,
Yes, sir. Till just a few years ago.
to St. Charles.
Then we moved mid-county. It's a
Mi-
world of
mid-county?
difference. Mid-county. It's a world of difference down here, really. 10 miles is a big life change and a lifestyle change, and yeah, we really like it down here.
And you've seen the changes from just the travel time from
Well, yeah.
Northern Kane all the way to
Correct,
mid-county.
Correct, yeah, yeah.
That cursed Randall Road thing, huh, out there. Proud mom of 3 kids, all out of the house now? Where are the kids?
My oldest is down at U of I getting a PhD in some inexplicable topic related to environmental air quality modeling.
Wow.
And my middle child is just finishing up a vocational program for computer-aided manufacturing and 3D printing. And my daughter is a nurse at Sherman.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, interesting you mentioned Sherman, because your husband has a medical practice in Algonquin.
Yes, he does. He's been up in Algonquin for Carpentersville, Algonquin area for 30 years. He's almost at the end of, being a medical practitioner, but he works at Sherman in the wound center, so
Oh, wow.
he gets a nice mix of things, and I have nothing to do with medicine at all. It's not my bag, so.
Good Lord. You earned your MPA from Northern Illinois University.
I did, yes.
That's really one of the most respected programs around.
Yes, my degree was a few years ago, so we have interns that are going through the program, and I tell you, they look so young. So it's nice to know that they're still coming, qualified candidates are still going through the program. So yeah, it was a great experience for me. Served me well.
Indeed it has, because you've worked for the city of Elgin and the village of West Dundee, and most recently for Kane County's Department of Transportation.
Yes, I've worked in Kane County my whole career, big cities.
Are you not allowed to leave Kane County?
Yeah,
or
I
is it
don't
just
know.
part of the-
I've tried. There's like a force field. I can't get past it. No, I just think it's just been a career goal to just make a difference in the area where I live. I think that's important, and you can make a difference, and that's what I've tried to do. So it's nice to be here, and I'm
Well,
enjoying
speaking
my
of
job
making a
so far.
difference, you have for 6 years served as and Mike Clements probably knows this, a CASA.
Yes, I know the secret handshake for that.
Yeah, there's a
too.
secret handshake for the CASA too? Do you get
Yes.
half off ticket prices to the gala?
I love going to the gala. So I like
No.
to volunteer, but we also support it. So it's nice to do both, and it's been the most rewarding thing I've done in a long time. And I'm sure you can appreciate that, right? It's heartbreaking, but it's also rewarding.
May I ask a poignant question? How do you find the time
Well,
and marshal the emotional strength to do that?
well, it's just, it's a calling. I would say that I've had more time in the past, and so now I have had a huge case just closed, so now I'll be taking probate cases, which require a little less time and a little less intensity. So I'm going to kind of go that way for a while and see if that works.
That's impressive. Any questions from the council for Ms. Becker? Alderman Burkhart.
Sure, what, sounded like you've had some great work experience. What drew you to the Geneva job, and what are you enjoying about it so far, and, what are you hoping to accomplish here?
Well, I was really not looking actively in my former job at KDOT, but I saw the job opening, and Kathleen and I have worked together, and Rich also, at West Dundee, and it was one of the most rewarding career experiences. We worked well together, and I saw the job posting, and I emailed her. I'm like, should I apply? And she encouraged me to, and so I'm really
We're
looking
looking at a trilogy tonight? You got the West
I know.
Dundee trilogy here?
It's
Trying
just
to annex West Dundee?
Yeah, yeah. So, what I hope to accomplish here, I'm excited to learn a new skill set. Transportation planning, I knew nothing about 6 years ago, and I learned enough in 5 years to take large chunks of what I learned and apply it here. For instance, I'm trying to explore the nexus between bike and ped and tourism, and the empirical evidence that shows that cyclists bring X number of dollars to communities where there are regional trails located, and exploring Metra as a tourism transportation kind of thing also. So it's quirky, but I think it'll work, and so it's nice to have that skill set to bring into this job also.
Sounds all, that you're speaking my language. That sounds great. Can you tell us what your job responsibilities are, kind of day by day, week by week, for people listening?
Well, I've just been doing a lot of absorbing, learning a community's history and learning the backstory and all the, historical knowledge. It takes a long time, and delving into files and finding out how policies were made, how decisions were made. So I'm doing a lot of work on the Southeast Area Master Plan and the Couts Road Extension, trying to work and help Kathleen get positioned for that. I'm also doing some work on an interactive business map that will help in our tourism efforts, so that we can have a mobile app so people will be able to come and sort by type of business and find areas that they can go to using their mobile device as opposed to a paper map or being on a desktop. So a couple different initiatives that we're exploring and hope to have launched sooner rather than later, but it's baby steps.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jennifer. Item 4, folks, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments this evening? Item 5 is the omnibus agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are considered to be routine by this council and can be considered and acted upon with one motion. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Alderman Marks makes the motion on item number 5, the omnibus agenda. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Bruno. Any questions or comments? Madam Deputy Clerk, please take the roll.
Bruno?
Aye.
Burghart?
Aye.
Clements?
Aye.
Ruby?
Aye.
Kilberg?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
McGowan?
Aye.
Radecki?
Aye.
Swanson?
Aye.
Item 5 passes with 10 affirmative votes, no nay votes, and no abstentions. We skip to item 10, municipal bills for payment. We kindly ask our deputy clerk to please read the bills in their aggregate for our consideration.
Municipal bills for payment total $3,489,202.77.
Mayor, I move that we approve and pay the bills as read. The individual items that add up to that amount can be found in tonight's packet on the city website.
Alderman Bruno makes the motion to pay the bills as presented. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Clements. Questions or comments regarding the bills? Madam Deputy Clerk, please take the roll.
Burghart?
Aye.
Clements?
Aye.
Ruby?
Aye.
Kilberg?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks? McGowan?
Aye.
Radecki? Swanson?
Aye.
Bruno?
Aye.
Item 10 passes unanimously. We skip to item 11A, or head to item 11A, Committee of the Whole items of business. Item A is to approve ordinance number 2018-31, establishing special service area number 33 for the Cooperwood subdivision off of beautiful South Street. Is there a motion? Motion by Alderman Radecki, seconded by Alderman Ruby. Any questions or comments? We have our Director of Public Works, Mr. Babica, here this evening. Seeing none, hearing none, a roll call vote would be in order. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Clements? Aye. Ruby?
Aye.
Kilberg?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
McGowan?
Aye.
Radecki?
Aye.
Swanson?
Aye.
Bruno?
Aye.
Burghart?
Aye.
Item 11A passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 13, new business and public comment. Any comments, questions, curiosities? Okay, Alderman Ruby?
I just wanted to say thank you to my favorite Public Works Director for his role in getting garbage stickers are at Aldi. Yay! And for the public to know that as well. Go to Aldi for your garbage stickers. They do have them, finally.
Anyone else? Alderman Burkhart.
I helped at the Fox Valley Marathon, a very steamy marathon, and I wasn't even running. It was hot. So thanks again to Public Works and the Police Department for all the work they do to make that a safe and really attractive course for runners who come from all over northern Illinois and the Midwest to run in that race. So thank you.
Mrs. Dawkins.
This is more of a reminder for not the council, but everybody watching, and then some. This Thursday, the SPAC is hosting basically a town meeting to talk about the strategic plan, and so we'll give you our little commercial.
Is your strategic plan sitting on the shelf gathering dust? Then put that plan down and join us for an event of epic proportions.
That's right! This Thursday, September 20th, the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee invites you to attend the 2018 Community Forum. That means you, residents, stakeholders, students, merchants. For one night and one night only, you'll have the opportunity to check out the latest in strategic planning. This plan's got road improvements, downtown parking, trees, groundwater resources, capital assets, emergency services, bike storage, recycling carts, public art. But that's not all.
Wait, there's more?
You betcha! But if you want to help plan Geneva's future, you need to be there at 7 p.m. Thursday, September 20th. It's one night and one night only at the Geneva Public Works Facility, located at 1800 South Street in Geneva.
As you can tell, we're excited about Geneva's new strategic plan. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Clements, chairperson of the city's Strategic Plan Advisory Committee. Last fall, you spoke and we listened, and we're proud to present to you with a draft strategic plan. We spent the last several months reviewing your input and listening to what matters to you. With your help, the new plan will guide our community moving forward and ensure Geneva remains a great place to live. But we're not done yet. Before we finalize the plan, we're giving the public one more opportunity to learn about Geneva's vision for economic vitality, strong governance, environmental stewardship, excellent municipal services, and quality of life. So whether you live, work, or learn in Geneva, we're inviting you to join us on Thursday, September 20th at 7 p.m. in Geneva's Public Works Facility. We hope to see you there.
Freeze frame.
So we hope that Thursday evening will be as enjoyable as that video was. So we are encouraging residents, business owners, any stakeholders to attend Thursday night at the Public Works Facility.
$10 to anyone who can tell me who that was in the wig.
Booking.com. We can't guarantee you'll find.
We're gonna miss him. No, you did not. That's why he's not here tonight. He's taking advantage of the employee assisted program. Anything else for the benefit of the public? If not, oh yes, Mr. Radecki, forgive me.
One comment about strategic planning. You know, when we did this, you know, I don't know when the first one was done, but it was, you know, I began with the process 20 years ago in one of my first runs at it, and some of the people that helped us through that process were very impressed with Geneva. That at that time we were one of the few communities that really spent and invested a lot of time in strategic planning, and it's really paid off a lot. I mean, this is a really important process for our community. I think it sets us apart. I think it's an advantage for us, and the participation and the level of participation with our citizens, I think, is second to none. So, you know, over the years, I've seen, I guess, the fruits of the labor of that, and I'm just, you know, it's just been the truth of my experience to see how important that is and how well it's worked, and my hat's off to everybody that, you know, participates in that process. So, just a little endorsement. Thank you.
Well said. Anyone else? A motion to adjourn would be in order, if there's any interest. Alderman McGowan, seconded by Alderman Marks. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.